Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to World's Finest Comic Book Wednesday, a comic book bonanza team-up between the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage. Hyde Cottage here, relocated to a very, very old house in Vermont. Michael K Vaughan and I'll leave a link to his channel down below, have taken to teaming up to discuss comic books every Wednesday. And we have a pretty grim choice today. And I have to say, it was largely mine. Now I know that a lot of you out there like anticipating that when Wednesday comes around, Michael and I are going to disagree about something, mainly because he has such terrible, terrible taste. And I'm going to demonstrate how terrible his taste is in this video. But today we're both angry. It's like someone else picked the book, because today we are looking at a comic book that is legendary for how bad it is. A run on a comic. We've mentioned a run where you get a writer and maybe an artist or two artists that take a pre-established book and have their own very distinct arc on that book. And we usually talk about runs that are great. Walt Simonson's run on Thor, for instance, or the Claremont Cockrum Byrne run on the X-Men. But sometimes, every once in a while, we talk about a run that's not only bad, but legendarily bad. And that's what we're talking about today in what is known as the Detroit era of the Justice League of America. Justice League, of course, had been going on for decades and decades, and it was DC's premier super team, where you have the greatest superheroes that have ever been invented, all teaming up together. And the rough template of that was the first superhero team that was ever made, the Justice Society of America, during World War II. But during a lot of those adventures, the Justice Society, the JSA, would get together. There were a whole bunch of great characters on that show. It was a ridiculously overpowered team, just ridiculously. Any team that has Green Lantern, Dr. Fate, and the Spectre all on the same team is ridiculously overpowered. But the way the writers got around that, and also the way the writers got around the fact that some of them were working in Cleveland, some of them were working in Brooklyn, and some of them didn't know. They were writing one character and didn't know about anything about any of the others, what they could do, what not. There were no industry style books. There were no character Bibles back then, because these were done for 10 cents for kids. But in the heyday of the Justice Society of America, the team would get together, they would learn about a threat. Paradegaton is trying to destroy Pittsburgh or whatever, and for some reason they want to stop him. And they would learn about that threat, and then they would all break up to pursue different aspects of that threat. And they would only come together at the end. So the team was never really, almost never really facing anything directly. Unlike the same pattern held true in the 1940s over in this was before Marvel Comics, but it was the Marvel side of things with the All Winners Squad, where a whole bunch of timely superheroes would do the same thing, the exact same thing. The All Winners Squad virtually never fought a villain together. But the Justice League of America decided to fix that. They updated from Society to League, and they brought in all of the newer versions of the characters. By this point, DC had been revamping a lot of its characters. The Flash was different. There was still a Flash. He still had super speed, but he was a different character, different costume. Green Lantern, radically rechanged. Still the same name. The Atom, radically rechanged. And even more problematically, Hawkman. But Hawkman's a video on his own. I'm sure that in someday, Michael and I will get to the tangled history of Hawkman. But the Justice League of America did tend to fight villains at the same time. And not only at the same time, but one of the elements that was stressed in those early issues that we've already talked about, Mike Sikowski artwork, was teamwork. Where no matter how powerful the individual League members were, and there were 5 of them who were as powerful as any lineup of the Avengers, singly, no matter how powerful the team was, they always had to work together to solve a mystery or to get out of a trap. And that was very nice. That was really good to watch, to read. Then Marvel came along. The new age of Marvel Comics, the Stan Lee age of Marvel Comics, in which you could still have super teams, sure, but you wouldn't expect them all to like each other, and you wouldn't expect all of them to be nice. They'll be working through issues, man, like, suck it to me. They'll be working through issues, just like you are and all of your loser friends. They won't be upstanding, square-jawed characters anymore who just fight evil because they're good and evil's not. Instead, they'll fight evil, I guess, because evil invaded my home or ruined my favorite brand of chocolate chip or whatever. or demonstrated on my campus or threatened my aunt or something like that. It just amazes me that a whole generation of comic book readers could see, for instance, the origin story of Spider-Man, where Peter Parker gains his superpowers, immediately starts to cash in on them, and only gains a social consciousness when his own uncle is shot to death. And everybody's cheering, oh, with great power comes great responsibility. Oh, I learned that when I was a kid from Spider-Man, getting all teary-eyed on Twitter. I want to say to each of these people, I don't ever say it, but I want to say, you do realize that that's a moral compass that started broken and just got more broken. You do realize that, right? It's certainly a far cry from the heroes that I grew up with, who were all of the heroes in the Justice League of America. The original Justice League of America was Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, The Flash, and the Martian Manhunter, plus an Aquaman, and a teen sidekick named Snapper Carr, who was the only bid that the writers back then made towards any kind of relevancy or currency, was to have a 38 skidoo finger-snapping teenager in there who goes to sock hops and whatnot. Like most fans of Justice League of America, I wanted Snapper Carr to die very quickly, and preferably on camera. But once Stan Lee introduced that virus into the comic book world of real, relatable heroes with feet of clay and interpersonal conflicts, well, then it took off. And DC, like, the awkward maiden aunt over in the corner, belatedly got the idea that it wanted to be cool. And so started to do this. And it wasn't so bad. I mean, it was painful a lot of the time. It infected the Justice League of America pretty early on. By issue number 150, it was rife. It was run through. And Michael and I will get to those eras of the comic. But eventually, as Michael says in his video, I'll leave a link to his video down below, but as he says in his video, eventually those kind of angsty teams really took off, both in Marvel with the all-new, all-different X-Men, but also in DC, who managed to do, thanks to Marv Wolfman and George Perez, to do it right with the Teen Titans, which was appointment comic book reading every month and sold appropriately. And the Justice League at the time was languishing. I was still buying it, but I think I might have been the only one. It was languishing. And there was a storyline in which belligerent Martians from Martian Manhunter's race attack Earth and partially destroy the orbiting satellite that was the JLA's headquarters. And the story branches off into a different story that leads the marquee members, the big guns of the team, to an alternate Earth. So they're not around anymore when Aquaman decides to disband the team. And he gives a long, sententious speech to the public about how the Justice League has always been a fraud. It's always been a bunch of showboaters who don't care and have no commitment, a bunch of dilettantes who are only part-time heroes. This is Superman he's talking about, who saved the world, including all of Aquaman's fish, many, many times. And as Michael points out in his video, hilariously, these are also his friends that he's talking about. The thing that was required to make this new Aquaman was not, as I've heard many people say, to write him out of character. The thing that was required was worse, and I lay it at the feet of Stan Lee. It was to give him a character at all. He hadn't had one for the previous 30 years. If suddenly you give him a character, well, you can make him anything you want. But, well, anyway, this Aquaman decides not only to disband the team, to formally disband the Justice League, but then, as his right as an original member, to reform the team and stock it with new characters. They're not all new. The Martian Manhunter decides to stick with this new team, and so does the Elongated Man, Ralph Dibny, who's like a weaker, less interesting version of Plastic Man, and also Zatanna, who is a rare innovation in the comic book world. It's not rare anymore, but it was at the time, where she's the daughter of a character who had his own comic strip. Zatara was a magician who spoke his spells backwards, spoke the words backwards, and pretty much all powerful. One of the million all powerful characters. Dr. Fate, the Spectre, the Green Lantern, the original Green Lantern was these characters were basically all powerful. Johnny Thunder's Thunderbolt, they could do anything. They were the Deus that you use if you need a Deus Ex Machina, and Zatanna was the same way. And suddenly, in this new era of comic books, he's nowhere to be found. But his daughter, Zatanna, has grown up, and she has the same ability, backwards magic. But backwards magic that she doesn't have to prepare ahead of time, like is sometimes true with Doctor Strange, and that has no limits whatsoever. She could say, world, stop spinning. And as long as she says it backwards, the world will do it. So she joins the team as well. And you might be thinking, well, okay, then what's the problem? The problem was the other members, the new members that the writer and artist brought on board, who were one travesty on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, and all of those travesties built on top of a toxic waste dump that was built on top of a haunted graveyard. They were some of the worst executed and conceived characters in the history of comic books. There was Vixen, who got her powers from a magic trinket. She wore it around her neck, and it allowed her to summon animal powers. So she could summon the ability of a bird to fly, or the ability of a rhino to break through a plank of wood, or I don't know, the ability of a macaque monkey to hurl its own feces. And she is portrayed in Justice League Detroit, is what we'll call this. It was never called that, but everybody thinks of it that way, because Aquaman relocated the team. In addition to his scolding about how Superman and Wonder Woman don't care enough about the world, he also thought it was a bad look and a bad message to have the headquarters in orbit, far away from everyday people's problems. In fact, that horrible condescending song, I Am Everyday People, ought to be the theme song of this whole wretched travesty of a version of the Justice League. So instead, Aquaman decides to relocate to inner city Detroit, to a slum in inner city Detroit. And they're not away from anybody. They don't have a compound or anything like that. That's not the Hall of Justice. Despite the fact that they know they're going to get attacked by supervillains, they nudge up right close to all of the stereotyped ethnic shopkeepers and a stereotyped 90-year-old black woman named Mother Wisdom, who waves her cane at people and knows what's what. Aquaman is a king. Martian Manhunter is the exile, and as far as he knows, one of the last of his kind. But never mind. We're going to bow to the wisdom of this 4-foot-tall, 90-year-old black woman in ghetto Detroit. You wanted to take the author aside and say, this is incredibly condescending. All of it is. It's all not just a bad idea as a superhero concept, but it's incredibly condescending to everyone you think you're giving props to. But all throughout this book, I mean, Vixen's backstory, she was a model, and now she has this trinket and thinks she might want to fight crime. She's not sure. She's never done it before. We have no idea if she has any training or knows how to use this thing. But that's a kind of interesting idea on its own, except that she is immediately portrayed as a raving, uncontrolled, bad pun-making nymphomaniac. So if you wanted to like the character, well, you're not going to be able to. All you're going to have to be able to do is be embarrassed by her. And if you think you're embarrassed by her, the only halfway decent concept among these new characters, well, the others don't get any better. There's Steel, a young man who wears a stereotypical Captain America red, white, and blue outfit, and who was basically medically remade by his grandfather, who was a legacy character from Commander Steel from World War II era, a third-rate character, much like the Patriot or something like that, only he remakes his son so that his son is a cyborg. A not too subtle nod in the direction of Cyborg, one of the original characters in the new Teen Titans that was doing so well. And this kid has been, the original, Vic Stone, Cyborg from the Teen Titans, was rebuilt by his father because he was attacked by a weird energy wave and would have died without the rebuilding. Steel's father just remakes him for the fun of it, just to make him a hero, and offers the new Justice League a compound in Detroit as their headquarters. So you've got this Steel character who is now a very heavy, very powerful cyborg. He's largely bulletproof, has no real motivation or personality of his own, has never done any superheroing, thinks he might like it. This is the Justice League. The Justice League of America we're talking about, taking on these pikers. And if Steel and Vixen were bad, well, then there are the other two. One is called Gypsy, or as Michael calls her hilariously throughout his video, Gypsy Stereotype, who sometimes goes by just Gypsy. Or as he points out, and this is true in the comics, sometimes the characters call her Gyp. Like Gypsy is harder to say than Gyp. And you might be wondering about her. Well, she wears tattered gypsy clothing. She has bangles. She has a skirt instead of a skin-tight outfit. And what's her superpower? She can hide really well. She's really, really good at hiding. So you definitely want her on the Justice League of America, the most premier superhero team in the history of the world. You definitely want her as a member. Do we know what her past is? No. Do we know how I got her powers? No. Has she ever fought crime before? No. Does she really want to be on the Justice League? Not really. I guess I'll do it if you ask me real nice. Aquaman. And then there's the worst character of them all, and that is Vibe, a young man named Paco, who is from the streets. And the reason we know this is because the writer decided to give him a cod Hispanic accent. What you talking about, eh, say? Over and over and over again. Over and over again. He wears, brace yourself, booktube, parachute pants. He is all of your 1980s fashion faux pas rolled up into one place, and he has seismic abilities of some kind. He mainly uses them to breakdance when he's not spray painting public property. He mainly uses them to breakdance. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this in the light, but in this case, it's probably better if you can't see it. That lighting has been an issue here at the old house, but that is Vibe breakdancing. And I want to read you some of the deathless dialogue here, because Vixen and Zatanna are watching this teenage boy breakdance and thinking, well, he's dressed like a freak, and he's breakdancing in front of the jiving crowd on the sidewalk in Detroit. Maybe it'd be good to recruit him to the Justice League of America. Zatanna says, I'll say this for Vibe, he's got energy. Just watching him, I feel exhausted. And Vixen says, he's good, Z instead of Zatanna. I'm glad we talked Aquaman into letting him join the new league. So he doesn't even go himself. The leader of the new league doesn't even go himself to see if this kid is any good at all. Doesn't put him in any kind of combat training. Is he agoraphobic? We'll never know. Zatanna says, still, it takes getting used to. Paco breakdancing on a street corner and the whole neighborhood knowing his secret identity. Try to picture any of the original leaguers doing something like this. Flash, Green Lantern, Batman, Superman. One thing's certain, whether for good or better, the league has changed. Breakdancing teenagers, disappearing gypsy girls, a headquarter in a slum. I wonder what's next. I can tell you what's next, and it's an option that Zatanna doesn't give us in this deathless dialogue. She says, whether for good or for better. You left out worse. It could be for good or for worse, and it turns out to be for worse. Because once Aquaman assembles this team, oh my God, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. No, you're not going to be able to see it. It's just not going to cooperate. The tablet's not going to cooperate, but it's just, in this case, it's just as well, because what you're missing is tiny little Mother Wisdom breaking up a fight between two knife-wielding baddies. It gets worse, because once Aquaman assembles the team, he realizes that he has no team-leading ability, which is why no one has ever had him lead a team before. He's been a king, but he's never been a team leader of anything. He's always been one of the second-string Justice Leaguers, even though he was a founding member. Keep in mind that although Justice League Detroit mentions for the first time in DC continuity that Aquaman is in fact superpowered, what we're told is that he has the strength of 10 men, because he was adapted to live at the bottom of Earth's oceans. Of course, you'd be a lot stronger than 10 men if you were adapted to live back there, and it doesn't matter anyway, because eventually, decades later, writers decided to make Aquaman a little stronger than 10 men, which is good. That's as it should be. But right now, up until this point, we were never told that. And in these issues, we're told that he has the strength of 10 men. But he realizes that he has no ability to lead the team. He can't get anybody to do what he wants. Martian Manhunter would have been a much, much better choice. But for some reason, Aquaman is the one who does all of this. He takes it into his head to reform the team and give it a sense of purpose, connecting with the people. And because he runs into problems with his team over and over again, he realizes that he has no choice but to mind wash them. He has, keep in mind, Aquaman, one of his only superpowers is that he has the ability to telepathically command fish and marine life to do what he wants. I say fish and marine life, even though the early writers of Aquaman clearly thought that whales were fish. They clearly thought that dolphins were fish. He has, in other words, low-level telepathy. And in this series, for the first time ever, we get the idea that maybe he can use it on humans. Now, Martian Manhunter is a telepath. He can use his telepathy on just about anybody, including, I would assume, fish and seagoing mammals. Aquaman, though, this is the first time. He pulls a mental whammy on a couple of different characters and a couple of different issues while the Martian Manhunter is watching and disapproving, not liking the fact that you're doing this to your teammates. That has the kernel of being interesting, but of course, like everything else in Justice League Detroit, it's mishandled, badly mishandled. Mainly because, as far as we know, Aquaman would never do anything like that. Be that as it may, eventually, this team, if you want to call it that, they don't know each other. They never work out with each other. They never test each other. They don't trust each other. They don't know anything about each other, but they eventually have to get into the business of being a superhero team. And one of the first villains that they fight is an old-style Justice League villain called Amazo. He is an android who has adapted the powers and abilities of the original Justice League. And he goes on the loose. And this new Detroit Justice League has to figure out how to stop him. They rush out right away to stop him. Amazo has the combined strength of Wonder Woman, Superman, the Martian Manhunter. He has the combined energy abilities of the Martian Manhunter and Green Lantern and the Flash. In other words, there's no chance whatsoever that this stupid, lame-ass team could last even 5 seconds. And in one of the only ways that I will doff my hat to the execrable writing in this series, they don't. They don't last 5 minutes. Amazo mops the floor with them. And they manage to pull off the defeat of Amazo through a mind trick, and only through the good offices of the Martian Manhunter, who wasn't around when they got the floor mopped with them. He shows up at the last minute as a Deus Ex Machina and pulls a whammy, a psychological trick on Amazo that shuts him down, and that stops the fight. No idea why the fight wouldn't start up right away when Amazo wakes back up and be just as bad. We're never told anything like that. It's a typical wrap-up scene. It is ironic because this Justice League laying waste, helping Amazo to lay waste to Vancouver, and then not caring, they don't even bother to call the local cops to pick up this inactivated android before they just start taking off in different directions. Literally, the panel has them taking off in different directions. The exact thing that Aquaman was complaining about the original League doing. But not only is that bad enough, but once the dust has settled and the Martian Manhunter has saved the day, Aquaman walks up to him and says, "I don't feel like leading this team anymore. They're a bunch of losers." He doesn't quite say that, but he drops him like a hot rock and says, you can take the team now. I'm leaving. Bye." And the Martian Manhunter is suddenly on a vessel, a skycraft of some kind. We never have any idea what it was, what it is, who pays for it, who fuels it, how it's insured, what kind of clearance it has. There's never any of that background stuff done like is done in the Avengers. Instead, Martian Manhunter just takes over the team. How well do they know him? Not at all. Did any of them agree to sign up with him as opposed to signing up with Aquaman? No, none of them did. Did any of them have any thoughts about that? Well, we've got lame-ass stories to tell, so no use delving into any of that. And somehow, this monstrosity kept trundling along. I was amazed when I was reading it, thinking this has to be some sort of elaborate practical joke. And the comic book press magazines of the time, foremost of which was Amazing Heroes, it was around this time that they started a death watch for these heroes, hoping out loud in every issue that DC would not only retire these characters and bring back the original League, but ignominiously kill these characters. The writers kept saying, let's just wait for them to get picked off like fish in a barrel. And it happens. It eventually does happen. That exact same thing happens. And these characters, well, to universal cheers from pretty much everyone, Vibe is simply murdered. He drops dead in his stupid visors with his stupid outfit, and Steel is blasted to smithereens, and then dies. So we don't have one more boring flag-draped cyborg super strong guy going around fighting crime for no reason whatsoever. Gypsy does what she does best. She disappears. She gets badly wounded and disappears. And as far as I know, has never recurred. These are laughable characters. This was obvious even at the moment that it was happening as a dumb misstep. One of the dumbest in comic book history. Vixen, I think, continues for a while and has been reinvented a few times to maybe get rid of some of her dumber aspects. Proving that she did have at least a germ of salvageability, but the others, no, no. Eventually, the writers and the powers that be at DC realized that if you want to have the Justice League, especially if you want to rebuild it after a disaster like Justice League Detroit, you need the Magnificent Seven. You need the main lineup of the team. And Grant Morrison came along and did that in a properly epic, big series of issues that suddenly made the Justice League, again, appointment comic books every month. You had to get the Justice League because it was all of a sudden, as innumerable fans said, it was all of a sudden good again. Because it was widely acknowledged that the Justice League Detroit era was absolutely terrible, that it was a perfect example of what happens when a comic book isn't good. And you might say, well, if it sounds like you're agreeing with Michael Vaughan completely. You both revile this thing as just absolute nonsense. So why did you start the video by saying that Michael was unhinged? A Marvel zombie, a Marvel fanboy. Well, I'll tell you why. Because if you watch his video, what is he holding up? What is he holding up for all of his video? He's not holding up ebooks that he got from a friend. No, he's holding up a $100 hardcover omnibus of this run that he bought with his own money. That is either a sign of deranged behavior, or it means that perhaps he is an android double of some kind or other. But he's waving that omnibus around when he should be burying it in the backyard. So there you go. That is your Comic Book Wednesday, your world's finest Comic Book Wednesday. And it's an ugly one. We have now passed the gallstone of DC Comics. We can only go up from here. As bad as a lot of the others got, this is the lowest point for one of their greatest books. I think that I don't pick the itinerary here for World's Finest Comics. Michael does, so we'll have to see where his fiendish mind goes next. But we did classic JLA, and now we have done whatever the opposite is of classic JLA. So it might be time to move on to something else and stop talking about JLA every week. But it's entirely up to him, and you're lucky that way. Because if it were entirely up to me, we would be talking about the Legion of Superheroes every week. So at least this way you're getting variety. Although in this case, at what price? Anyway, we have now finally buried Justice League Detroit. Long may it molder. And I will see you all next Wednesday. Thank you, BookTube.